This is how much debt we had 8 years ago. $120,000. With this amount of money, you could travel the world 5 times, feed a family of 4 for 15 years, buy 283 shares of Tesla, or attend overpriced private colleges, buy fancy cars you can't afford, and spend the first 3 years of your marriage paying everything off. Well, the last one's actually what we did. What's up, guys? I'm Mike.
And I'm Britt.
And we got married shortly after getting out of college, about the same time that our first student loan bills were coming in the mail. And as you can imagine, living paycheck to paycheck due to the significant portion of our income going out in payments on all this every month.
However, we were able to pay off everything in less than 3 years. The first $60,000 we were able to pay off in 2 years, and the last $60,000 we were able to pay off in 11 months. We didn't do anything very sophisticated, no fancy bells or whistles involved. All we did was follow some very basic steps that we'll be outlining in this video.
So if you're wondering how you can become debt-free as well as quickly as possible and regain control over your money and your financial life, keep watching because Brittany and I are going to be going over the exact steps that we took. Let's get into it.
Step 1 is very obvious, but it's something you have to do first, and that is figure out exactly how much you owe and who you owe it to.
So on a sheet of paper or Excel document on your computer, make a list of all the debts you have, whether that be car notes, student loans, credit cards, medical bills, family loans, whatever it is, make a note. Include the principal balance, how much you have remaining on the loan, the interest rate, the monthly payments, and who you owe it to. What Brittany and I did ourselves when we were going through this process, and what we would recommend you do, is list the debts out smallest at the top to largest at the bottom. If you have a primary mortgage on your house, you can write that out, but kind of put that below, kind of separate from everything else. If you have debts on investments that are actively putting money into your pocket that are increasing your income, that's not what we're talking about right now. We're just talking specifically about consumer debts, credit cards, car loans, things like that, that are basically taking away at your income every month. So as an example of how you could do this, if you're doing this at home or on a sheet of paper, you can list things out like Brittany and I have things listed out here. This is pretty much an account of the vast majority of the debts that we had when we were first starting our debt-free journey. So Brittany and I have these listed from, as you could probably see already, smallest debt to largest debt. So our credit card was the smallest debt that we had. This big student loan debt that we had to Sally Mae, that was the largest one we had. But yeah, this is just an example. So the name, who we owed the debt to, the amount we owed right here in this column, the interest rate, and the monthly payment right here. So as you can see, our total monthly payments was $1,374.58. This step is very important right here, just listing everything out. That way you can kind of get an account of everything that you owe, who you owe it to, and nothing's in the dark. You're able to see everything and kind of like, okay, it's a big chunk of money going out every month, but at least I know how much I owe. It's right here, and I can deal with it.
As funny as this may sound, it's actually stress relieving because now you have it all laid out and you have numbers you can actually start to chip away at.
So this step can actually be done today, like right now. Step 2 can also be done right now. And step 2 is determining your monthly expenses and monthly income. So you'll want to do this because you want a baseline of income on which you can comfortably rely on every month. And you kind of want an idea, a ballpark estimate of your expenses every month, kind of like just bare necessities, what you actually need to spend money on versus what you maybe are spending money on. So the income side of things, if you're employed by somebody else, this should be pretty straightforward to figure out. So you can just go back and look at the past 3 or 4 pay stubs and take an average of everything. What you can also do is pay attention to your paychecks over the next 30 days. Average those out as well.
This was me, and it was super easy to do. It was always the same, and I could rely on it every 2 weeks.
If you're self-employed, you may already have a better understanding of your income because more than likely you already have bookkeeping software and you're keeping up with all your income and expenses on a daily basis and things like that. I'm self-employed, and in this step, what I did is kind of like went back through my books and averaged out over the previous 12 months how much money I was earning on average per month. So whatever your income is, whether you're single or you're married, you want to write down the income that you can rely upon.
Next, you'll want to look at your spending habits, and this may take a little bit longer. And what you'll want to do is look at the past 30 days to 60 days of your bank statements and just look to see what your patterns are and what you're spending money on.
If you use a credit card, you'll want to look through your credit card statements as well.
So once you have that figured out, you'll start to be able to break it down into categories such as food, your rent, utilities, your car payments, gas, eating out, cell phones, etc.
So for example, like on your credit card or bank statement, if you see $50 here at the grocery store, and then $25 down here at the grocery store, and then a little bit later like $60 at the grocery store. Under the grocery store or grocery category, whatever you want to call it for you, just make a list of all those expenditures for that month, and then at the very bottom, once you're done tallying up everything, every single time you went to the grocery store, make a grand total at the bottom, and do that for every single category. So once you're done doing that for the previous couple of months or however long, you want to also track your spending for the next 30 days and do the exact same thing, but record everything under the categories that you've already written down for the past 2 months. If you see anything else crop up, like under a different category, then make a new category for that expense. So for example, if the previous 2 months you didn't have any car repairs or anything like that, you didn't have to spend any money on fixing things that broke on your car, but this month you spent $200 or whatever, just make a new car repair category and then just record $200 for this month under that. And then hopefully by the end of kind of auditing the last 2 months of expenses and recording this month and pricing it kind of for this month, you will have a fairly accurate idea of how much money you're spending every month. If you get overwhelmed doing this, do not worry. There's a lot of information to write down. There's a lot of information to keep track of. There's a lot of stuff going on in your mind probably. When there's a lot of stuff going on in my mind all at once, I get stressed out and overwhelmed. This should be the worst it is. It will only get better from here. But this step is extremely important because if you don't know where your money is going out to every month, more than likely you're going to get to the end of the month and it's going to be like, oh, it's gone. All that money I earned.
That happened to me several times.
Yeah, and that's not a place you want to be in financially.
No, it's not.
So let's go back in here to Bernice and my Excel sheet and kind of go over our example of our monthly expenses. What we did over here, we categorized things into grocery, our rent, mortgage, utilities, gasoline, health insurance, auto insurance, life insurance, car repairs, medical expenses, internet, phone, all of our debt payments that were over here, haircuts, gym, and a couple of fun money items. We didn't want to list out all of these 13 lines of debt right here, so we just kind of lumped them into one big sum right here, the $1,374.58. Which leads us to the next step. Get ready for it. It's the dreaded B word, budgeting.
Basically what we just did, and that's making a budget based on your expenses.
This step can also be done today if you want to. So there's a lot of stigma attached to budgeting, and I'm not really sure why that is. I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of what a budget is actually for. A budget is not meant to like constrain you financially. It's just meant to put you back in charge of your money rather than your money being in charge of you. It's meant to give you a picture of where all of your spending is going. It's meant to give every dollar that you have, every dollar that you're going to spend, a purpose, a plan before you spend it. And so that way you're not getting to the end of the month and wondering where all of your money went. Some great resources for budgeting are mint.com and youneedabudget.com, or maybe some of you guys are already familiar with that. It's called, in short, YNAB. So youneedabudget.com is $7 a month. I've heard from people who use it, it's more than worth it. Mint.com is totally free. If, for whatever reason, you guys are more like us and are a little hesitant to put especially your financial information out there on websites like this, you can download our budget template. It's totally free. It's linked below, no email address required, but it's basically the outline of how Brittany and I budget our money every month. We've been using this kind of budgeting style for years, and it's worked very well for us.
And getting out of debt will be next to impossible unless you budget. This was a huge, huge part of us being able to become debt free. And the way we recommend doing this is listing all your expenses from the most important to the least important. So for example, food, water, clothing, and shelter all are things you have to have. So those are listed first. And then last would be something like going to the movies or going out for the weekend to buy some coffee or whatever it may be.
So that's basically what a budget is. You're telling your money where to go. You're planning everything out before it happens. And that way you're in charge. You're kind of like the director of your finances rather than your finances being the director of you.
If you're bad at this at the beginning, don't worry. It takes about 3 months to get the hang of this.
It took a while for us.
It took a while for us.
Yeah.
Because there were still things we were changing and debating about for the exact amounts and what we wanted to cut and what we wanted to keep.
So now that you kind of have an idea of what your monthly expenses are, it's finally time to start going ahead and thinking about saving for an emergency fund if you don't have one already. Step 4 is saving a small emergency fund. Regardless of whether you're in debt or not, an emergency fund is kind of a must-have because it protects you against basically just life and Murphy's Law. It also protects you against the risk of having to go into debt for an emergency. And in this case, if you're trying to pay off debt, it's going to protect you against the risk of going more into debt if you don't already have this available at your disposal. So the thing about this is you don't want to spend too much time saving up your baby emergency fund because the longer you take to do this, the more you're prolonging yourself being in debt. You also don't want to have too little money in your emergency fund and risk being too exposed financially when an emergency does happen.
So we recommend saving at least 1 to 2 months worth of expenses, and for us that averages out to $3,000 to $4,000.
So when Brittany and I were becoming debt free, I think we had between $3,000 and $5,000 in our emergency fund at all times.
And it covered everything that we needed.
An example of an emergency would be like something breaking on your car.
Yeah.
Transmission breaks, $1,500 to replace it. Or, an unexpected hospital visit. Something that would not qualify as an emergency would be something like suddenly realizing you don't have enough money to go out to eat.
With your friends. If you already have this much in savings, that's great. You can move on to the next step. If you don't, here's what you need to do to start saving for your emergency fund. First, take all of your extra income after expenses are paid and transfer it into your savings account. Every single penny. This is why it's important, as we mentioned before, to write everything down and to have a budget, because now you can look at everything and where your money's going, so it's easier for you to start saving. We would recommend during this time to pay the minimums on your debt payments, just so you can focus on saving for your emergency fund faster.
Which leads us into step 5, and that is to start paying things off. So you know how much you owe, you know who you owe it to, you have a very good idea of your income and your expenses, you have a starter emergency fund in place.
And just like you did before with your emergency fund, you take every cent that's left over from your income minus your expenses and you put it all towards your debt. And there's several different ways of doing this. You can pay off your debts from smallest to largest, what's called the snowball effect.
So what the snowball effect is, basically you're paying off the smallest debt first. So once you have the smallest debt paid off, you take the monthly payment from the smallest debt and now snowball it into the second largest debt. And so now you have like kind of a double debt payment going into the second largest debt that you have. And then once that's paid off, you take all of that and then snowball it into the third largest debt. And then that just keeps snowballing and snowballing, hence the name snowball.
Another way of paying off your debt is from largest interest rate to smallest interest rate.
This would be the most mathematically correct way of doing things if you're trying to save the most amount of money possible. However, what Brittany and I have recognized is that becoming debt-free is a lot less about math and a lot more about behavior and psychology. But if you're patient enough, you could do it this way. You'll probably save a little bit of money in the process.
Another way of paying off your debt is from largest monthly payment to smallest monthly payment.
This is something that we kind of incorporated into our overall strategy. We didn't do much of this after the beginning, but we did do some of this. It may make sense just depending on your situation. Okay, so going back to our Excel sheet here, if you guys noticed, Brittany's and my running total for expenses was $3,629.58. Our income up here was $5,425 or so. So if we take our total income, subtract our total expenses, that leaves us just under $1,800 to put either toward an emergency fund or to pay off debt. Now, at the beginning, we put this toward an emergency fund. After our emergency fund was complete, we started putting all of this toward our debts. Now, if this were negative $1,795, that would be very bad. We'd be looking back up here and seeing if we could cut anything out. Which brings us to our last and final step, step 6, how to speed things up. So in Brittany's and my case, like we said, we had $120,000 of debt. And as you guys just saw, we had about $1,800 at the end of every month to pay things off with. If we had used all of that $1,800 toward that $120,000 of debt that we had, it would have taken us over 5 years to pay everything off. It didn't even take us 3 years. And that's because we did a lot of things to speed up the process. So if you want to pay your debt off as quickly as possible, here are some things that Brittany and I did after we had kind of gotten all of our numbers in order and on paper and everything like that.
So the first thing we did was sell a bunch of stuff. So anything from clothes, furniture, and even our cars to help try and get either the debt on the car down or to try and get the difference out of the car to then roll and pay off another debt.
So both Brittany and I sold our cars. I think I owed $22,500 on my car. I sold it and bought another car for $10,000. So that freed up about $12,000 of debt immediately.
And I sold mine and actually got $9,000 for it, and I only owed at that time around $6,000. We were able to use that $3,000 net to put towards another debt.
I mean, what you could do on a weekend is just go up into the attic, look around the house, make a note of things that you're not using, you just kind of have laying around, you haven't used in 3 years, and then have a garage sale, have a yard sale. You'd be surprised how much money you could probably make doing that. Another thing you could consider is debt consolidation. Now, this is not something that Brittany and I did, but depending on your situation, it could make sense. So going back to Brittany's and my debt list, our average interest rate for our $115,000 of debt here is 4.67%. If we had been able to consolidate all of this to one single debt at, 2%, that would have saved us 2.67% in interest on everything, and it may have been a good move in the long run. Just be careful about doing this. We're not all that familiar with debt consolidation. I've heard success stories, I've heard kind of shady stories regarding it, so just also keep in mind that consolidating your debt doesn't get rid of anything.
The next thing is increasing your income. So this could be finding more work, and this is exactly what we did. We had about 5 to 6 jobs between the two of us, and we made a lot of money during the last 11 months of paying off our debt, and that's how we were able to pay off $60,000 in that time frame.
So when Brittany and I started our debt-free journey, I think our income was somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. Like I said before, I was just starting up a business, Brittany was just starting her career. By the end of everything, we were earning between $10,000 and $12,000 monthly. You can pay off a lot of debt when your expenses are only like $3,000 a month on that income. And that's exactly what we did. It was not very fun. It wore us out. You're going to sacrifice the enjoyment you have in your life if you get 2 or 3 jobs, but this is very effective. If you do this, you could potentially save years later down the line of paying off debt if you just focus with intensity of working 2 or 3 jobs now, increasing your income $50,000, $60,000 a year by doing this, and then throwing all of that toward any excess debt you have. You'd be amazed how quickly you could start paying things off. If you guys want the Excel spreadsheet that Brittany and I used here, we're gonna make this available on our website. There's gonna be a free version of this and there's gonna be a paid version of this. So if you guys wanna mess around with this, if you kind of wanna play around just to see if it's gonna work for your life, feel free to download the free version. If you think this can save you guys some time in paying off all of your debt, you can use the code HALF-OFF and you'll get half off the price. Brittany and I wish we had something like this at the beginning. Yeah. It would have saved us a lot of time and a lot of headache trying to fit pieces together.
And it would have also helped, at least for me, because I'm so visual, give me more motivation just to see and cross off, okay, I'm done with this debt, what's the next one, and also help keep me more organized.
So that being said, guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, if it was helpful, please give it a thumbs up. It helps out tremendously with the YouTube algorithm. If you know a family member or a friend who could use this, maybe share the video with them. Again, our monthly budget template is linked below. It's free, no email address required or anything like that. The free version of the Excel spreadsheet we're using in this video, also no email address required for that either.
And if you're on Instagram, you can follow us at It's Mike and Britt.
Yeah, we post there every now and then. We actually just posted a couple days ago. So if you're on there and want to stalk us on IG, feel free. If you're curious about investing, our Robinhood link is also linked below. Sign up with that, grab your free stock, and with that being said, we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
It's an amount of money you have for an emergency fund. I mean, it's an amount of money you have for an emergency fund. You have quick access to available just in case of an emergency fund. It is not to be touched in any other.